Hello guys, this will be a series of Python tutorials for beginners. I believe that the best way or one of the best way to learn Python is to first see the flow of a typical Python program. I'm using Visual Studio to trace sample source code here and to demonstrate the parts of Python source code and some of its language features that are Pythonic or only occurs in Python. Okay, right now we are looking at an entry point of our Python source code. One of a unique characteristic of Python is that its entry point is enclosed by an if condition here. The reason being is to allow reusability of your source code. If you run your source code as a standalone on its own, name variable will be equal to main to indicate the fact that it is ran as a standalone. And another use is if you import your source code from another source code, then name will not be main, and thus this block here will not get executed. However, the other parts of your source code will get reused by the importing program, such as the variables declared here, the classes, or the functions appearing in the source code will get reused from that program by importing this source code. So, because of these use cases, we can see now the practicality of why we are including the entry point with an if condition. Okay. Now, this line here with a sharp is Python's comment. That line is not executed because it is commented. Now, this pass here is a no operation statement. It does nothing except that it occupies one instruction of the if block. This one. If len says that argv equals 1, do nothing. We cannot comment that pass instruction like that. That will cause a compile error because a block is not allowed to have an empty statement. So let's run the program to further view some of the way that a Python program executes. Okay. Our breakpoint has led us to this particular line. Request equals script context. Request here is a variable. The equal sign is an assignment operator, and the script context is an object instantiation or instantiating the script context object. Well, a function call also looks like that of script context. So in conclusion, it is fairly not intuitive by looking whether if this one is a function call or a class instantiation. But as the programmer of the source code, you will have to know this information on your own. Now, in object-oriented, one of the very first function that is executed when an object is created is an object's constructor. The purpose of the constructor is to initialize the object before the created object finally gets assigned to the request variable. Now let us step into the constructor of the script context. The init function underscore underscore init is the Pythonic way of indicating that this particular function is the class constructor. So indeed, script context is a class that inherits from all context superclass, meaning that script context is the subclass of all context. And this class keyword here is to indicate that script context is a class. Now let us look at the parameter of this constructor, which are 3 in all. The first is the self, the second is the URL, and the third is page name. The first parameter itself could not be strictly considered as a parameter that can be passed by a user a value. The parameters that the user can pass values are actually just the URL parameter and the page name parameter. Now the purpose of self is a placeholder or to hold to indicate that this method belongs to this particular object. Now you do not need to name it self. You can prefer to name it to any other name, but it is a long-standing Python tradition to name this first parameter as self. Now if defining just a simple function, you don't need self because you don't need to refer to an object that function belongs to. The presence of the self parameter is only to methods that belongs to a class. Now this parameter here is being assigned to none, and which is another of Python's built-in data types, and the page name parameter is assigned to an empty string. These are called default initialization parameters, meaning that if no parameters were being passed, then URL will assume none and page name will assume an empty string. Now if we go back to how script context was instantiated, indeed it is not passing any parameter, which means that URL will be none and page name will be an empty string. Now if this default initializer were not here, that would be a compiler error, because it will be needed that these parameters be given a value. The default initializing parameters that we can see here made it possible for us to call the constructor without passing any argument or any parameter. Now let us examine Python's way of um, decision decision operator, the if URL is none. Now you might ask, what is the difference between is and the equals operator? Yes, the equals operator still exists in Python, but there's a difference, a minor difference between the keyword is and the equals operator. So if URL is none, and if we hover the mouse to check its current value, it is none indeed, then it gets assigned this string. And if we hover the mouse again, and indeed the URL contains now that assigned string value. We're now seeing the environ variable as receiving the return value of the createenv function call. Now this time, createenv is a function call. It is not an object instantiation, and it is being passed these parameter values base underscore URL equals URL. And let us now go inside this function call. As you can see here, createenv is a simple function which accepts two parameters, args and kwargs. Now this is a fairly advanced way of defining a function parameter. Asterisk args simply means indefinite comma separated list of parameters, whereas kwargs means a dictionary or a name value pair. Now let us go one step back to the how this createenv was being called. Since it was being called with a name value parameter, it assigned those parameter on the kwargs, as we can see here, and the args parameter should be empty. Now we have skipped tracing into the environment builder class and assign directly the returned object of this class into the builder variable. And we are now inside a try statement. Returned builder.getEnviron. Let us try to go inside this function call. Before I do that, I like to emphasize that builder is an object, and an object has member methods which you can invoke. This is what we're seeing here. The getenv method of that object is being invoked. Okay. We are now in the getenv. member method of the class, and if we move a little bit higher up, okay, we can see that indeed this method belongs to the environment builder object. Now, input stream is a local variable being assigned with the self.input stream. Take note here, self is being referenced and dotted with the input stream. We are actually retrieving the input stream member variable of the object. Now the input stream member variable got declared in the init constructor. If we move up, this is the init constructor. And here, input stream. Now the input stream variable is now a member variable of that object. This input stream is actually coming from the constructor parameter. Here. Okay, let us now continue our execution flow of the getenv method. Now the content length is equals to the self.content length. We can hover the mouse to examine the values of these variables. If input stream is not none, okay, that is expected because input stream is none. Now if the content type it is none, so we are not going inside this block. And eventually settled to the final else block, which assigns input stream to the empty stream. Result equals this squiggly opening and closing brace indicates that result is a dictionary type. A dictionary type is just like an array, except that the index are not integers but are also keywords. Okay. If you're a keen observer, you will notice that this line here, div underscore path encode, looks weird because it is a method declaration. Take note that we are still inside the method. In fact, we are still inside the getenv method, but still we are allowed to define a method inside a method. The definition of this method does not execute the method, it only defines it. Because result is a dictionary, we can now initialize the values of this dictionary in this manner. So these are actually key value pairs, and the keys are appearing on the left side as a string. For example, this one, request method, and the value is self.method. The key of script underscore name and the value of path encode self script.root. Illustrates this dictionary assignment. Okay, script name is assigned the value of the return type of path encode. So we are to expect that the code flow will go here because this path encode is calling this innerly defined function. And indeed we are lead to that method body. If is instance x is Unicode, then it's not being encoded. Now I will quickly run through this key value dictionary assignment. Okay. This block here for key value in self headers to list self charset gave nothing because charset is okay, could be empty. Now finally, our getenv method call returns a value result dictionary. Okay, the try finally block that you're seeing here is an error handling method. This construct is common in most object-oriented languages. It is found in Java, C#, C++. The try cats, usually it appears as a try cats combination, but cats block is optional. And but here you're seeing the try finally combination. The purpose is to ensure that whatever happens within this method call, the statements in final block will get executed. That is, builder.close is guaranteed to be executed no matter what happens in any part of the statements within try or even inside the getenv. Okay, so the environ dictionary that was initialized inside the createenv method is now assigned to the environ object or environ variable, and if we hover the mouse we can see these values. And because environ is a dictionary, we can further add key value pair. Like in this one, we added http user agent as a key of the dictionary, and the value is CLI/script. Furthermore, the same, we added the wj.input key and assigned it to the standard input. And then we are now instantiating a request object, passing the environ dictionary into the constructor of that object. We are now going to zoom in into the constructor of the request class. Request is a class and whose parent are response based and request based or multiple inheritance, and its constructor is defined here, the init function. The constructor has a lot of parameters. If these parameters are not passed a value, then they will assume the value of the default initializer. It is recalled that the first parameter passed is the environment, which gets passed here because there was no other parameters being passed. Then we can assume that populate request equals true and shallow equals false. This particular line here is to call the constructor of the base class, request base. It is explicitly calling the init method of that class. Now the relationship between request class and response base, because response base is the superclass, it means that any variable in response base or some of the variables or method in response base can be reused by the request class, and let us now go inside the constructor of the request class. We can see that the base response derives from object. Object is a Python topmost superclass, and again let us examine the parameters of the constructor of this class. It has a self to indicate the pointer to the object. It has a response, status, headers, MIME type, content type, direct pass-through. All of the parameters have a default initializer. If no values are being passed to these parameters, these default initializer values will take over. Okay, we just skipped the constructor of headers. I accidentally pressed F10 and we are not able to see the constructor block of the header class. Okay, we're seeing here an initialization of a list, the open and close bracket, that is a list. One main difference of a list from a dictionary is that a list is indexed by an integer. I guess that's all for now, and let's continue this in the next session and take a review of other Python code works. Thank you. Have a nice day.